Hey guys, Jiaoqiu here, back with another video, and today I wanted to explain to you a list of things that Jiaoqiu can and cannot do, and help you discern whether or not Jiaoqiu is a good pull for your account. One major thing going in is that Jiaoqiu allows you to not run Trend of Universal Market on your preservation unit, as his Ashen Rose stacks from his talent, counting as burn being procced at the start of the enemy's turn, basically makes it so that the Trend Lycone's burn that it applies to the enemy is pretty much cancelled out, and in turn you won't get any value from this Lycone. It's not like it's a debuff to your preservation unit though, because this does allow you to run a stronger option like a Pard's Lycone, Day 1 of My New Life, and Landau's Choice. The thing that makes these Lycones better than Trend is that Trend has a very low base defense. If we compare it to just Day 1 of My New Life, it actually has around 70 less base defense, and on Lycones that is a lot of a difference. And it even has more defensive ability in allowing all-type reds for all allies. Speaking of those Ashen Rose stacks, let's move on to something else. They actually allow him to provide a Charon even more usability in Pure Fiction, and pretty much make her meta in there. The reason being, his Ashen Rose stacks, they stack up to 5. As long as you play the game correctly, you will always have 5 stacks on the enemies at all times, just maintaining your 3-turn ultimate. What this trace does is it allows stacks to carry in to the next enemy entering from the previous wave. So let's say you have one enemy that gets one-shotted in Pure Fiction that has 5 Ashen Rose stacks. If that enemy dies and a new one comes in, that new enemy will keep those 5 Ashen Rose stacks, making it so that you basically do not lose any uptime on a Charon gaining stacks ever, as long as you maintain that uptime, which basically allows a Charon to go ham in Pure Fiction. This one's a pretty specific thing for me as well that I can also make use of. Jiaoqiu allows for you in endgame content, like for example Apocalyptic Shadow for me. Let's say you're running DOT one half and Break Team the other half. So if you were doing this, you would obviously have to put Ron Mei with your Break Team, right? Jiaoqiu would allow for you to run him with the DOT side. And the cool thing about this is that he is a 5% difference from Ron Mei in DOT, at E0 of course. Meaning that while he is worse, if you can make another team composition work with him in your other composition, that in itself is value. Going back to the DOT part, if you're just pulling him for DOT to make that better, he is, like I just said, 5% worse than Ron Mei, considering they're both E0. But, of course, if you have E2, this gives him a 300% increase in his base burn damage in Ashen Rose, therefore making him better. And it's not like it's a small difference, it's like a, let me pull this document that I'm going to use for the rest of this video for my calculations. As we can see on this, it is going to be a 26% increase in damage in comparison to E0, of which pretty much means it'll be 21% better than Ron Mei at that point, as well as the fact that there's a 19% from his E1, but we'll get into that later. Now, Jiaoqiu's ult is pretty much just a straight up 15% increase in damage taken by the enemy, and his talent also allows for a stack up of to 45% damage from Ashen Rose stacks, also increase in damage. Therefore meaning if Jiaoqiu is on your team, that enemy will take more damage. Since it's worded specifically like increased damage, this means that it is just a straight up multiplier of damage. There's no other hidden mechanics in the game that are making it do less than it should, it's just a straight up increase. As for Jiaoqiu's build, Jiaoqiu is one of the harder units in the game to build, I would say, up there with the likes of Shui. You're gonna want this man on 160.1 speed, and also around 160 EHR. Now I myself am slacking, so I'm only at 148. I mean, this is a pretty reasonable build for like most people, though, to get to, but you are optimally going to want him on 160, 180 EHR with his signature Lycone. As for his set bonuses, you would either go for 4-piece Prisoner or 2-piece Prisoner, 2-piece Hackerspace. That would help you build speed, or if you want, you can just go 2-piece Hackerspace and 2-piece Rainbow. I personally just had better DOT pieces, so I just used those instead. For his planars, best in slot would be 2-piece Von Whack, 2-piece Panacony, Von Whack preferably because you want to get him in battle immediately. If you have him built correctly, this immediately just advances him forward and makes him faster than any enemies, and basically allows him to apply Ashen Rose stacks, and if you're on a Charon's team, immediately start generating Crimson Knot stacks, and regardless, just makes the enemy take more damage. What I'm doing here is I'm using 2-piece Forge of Calpagni. This is just to maintain the 160 speed threshold. If you are having trouble as well, I do recommend you start out doing this, but it isn't the best idea because it doesn't give you a guaranteed 3-turn ultimate. A guaranteed 3-turn ultimate is given to you by either 2-piece Panacony or 2-piece Von Whack, of which is because of their 5% energy regen rate that they both provide. And because of this, you're also going to want an energy regen main stat on your rope no matter what. He can't really use much else because his ult is like his most valuable part of his kit that you're going to want to maintain. I forgot to mention this in my first recording, but for his orb, you can use any main stat. The criteria being, if you reach a specific threshold with the stat bonuses given by the orb, like for example 160 speed or 160 AHR, you can use any main stat, like even wind damage, even lightning damage, but preferably in an optimal setting, you would want attack orb or fire damage. Now for his light cones, if you need EHR, I'm gonna recommend you use any of these light cones that provide effect hit rate, not black swans, but Sompos, this free-to-play Silverwolf cone. Those are the options that I would say would be pretty reasonable. But if you can maintain around like 140, 160 EHR without a light cone giving you that EHR, I would recommend using Resolution Shines as Pearls of Sweat, because in sheer damage-wise, assuming same stats, which is harder to get, you will only have like around a 7% difference from the signature light cone based on this document that I'm showing here. Now take it with a grain of salt. I didn't do these calculations myself, but this document usually shows me, they at least can give me a pretty good representation of the numerical difference that these should provide. Like as we can see here, 7% damage difference from S1. Now let's talk about his signature, those many springs. It gives an insane 60% EHR buff and also a pretty casual 24% damage increase. His light cone is so insane, it is the first case ever of a 5-star light cone from someone else being better on someone else compared to that person's own signature light cone. And this person is Black Swan. This light cone, believe it or not, if we go here, we can see that this new hit light cone is actually 4% different. Pretty insane difference, I know, but that 4% is still 4%. Now, do I recommend you pull this light cone if you already have Black Swans? Hell no. But if you don't have Black Swans, I mean, you might as well. But hang on, there are a few cases where you wouldn't want to pull for this. Let's say you're using Jiaoqiu and Black Swan in the same team. Obviously, you'd rather just have Jiaoqiu's light cone on himself. But you also don't want two Jiaoqiu light cones in the same team, as the effects will not stack and they won't really provide the same buff in comparison to just using her own signature light cone. So if you're just using Black Swan Kafka, Ron May, then pulling it might not be the worst idea, assuming you don't already have her signature, but honestly, I would say it's not worth it. Just get Black Swans, honestly. But it is still just a very funny thing to consider. That is the first case of that ever happening as far as I remember. Alright, and now let's get into his Eidolons. For his E1, it gives a straight up 40% increased damage to enemies afflicted with Ashen Roast, and pretty much doubles the uptime of the amount of Ashen Roast stacks you will apply, which pretty much just makes it easier to stack up to the maximum of 5. And his E2, of course, is what makes him usable on DOT. If you don't have E2 and you're trying to get him for DOT, I would say don't pull for him. As we can see with this document, what they say for the Eidolon difference is that on DOT, E1 is a 19%, on a Charon it's an 18%, so pretty close there. And then for E2, it's a 26% difference for DOT, while being only 8% for a Charon. So put simply, if you want to make your DOT stellar, pull for E2. Otherwise, no. Now, one really funny thing here, the 3 Argenti mains will be really glad about this. He is the best option for a Hypercarry Argenti if you're for some reason using him as your main DPS. He will be best in slot for him, basically due to the fact that he just increases ultimate damage taken and also just straight up damage. So that's pretty cool for y'all. And speaking of team compositions, let's talk about that. So, for a Charon, he is absolutely, undeniably the best support for her. He is better than Pela, he is better than Sparkle in terms of sheer comparison. Her optimal team is now herself, Jiaoqiu, Sparkle, and Aventurine, of course. So if we go to this document, the comparison for a Charon's team, this is a pretty free-to-play friendly team. As we see, if you're currently using a Charon, Pela, Silverwolf, Gallagher as the baseline, the difference between that and using a Charon, Pela, and Jiaoqiu and Gallagher compared is 65% AoE. Pretty much ignore the single target percentage because, you know, I don't think there's been like a single case where you'd actually need to hit a single enemy in like Apocalyptic Shadow MOC, like they always like spawn their goons at the end. But of course, for single target purposes, you would want to swap out Silverwolf if you still have her, in comparison to Pela. But Jiaoqiu is better for both now at this point. And usually you run Sparkle if you have E2 Acheron, but S1 is honestly all you need to make it work. So yeah, as we can see, he is by far the best option for E2 Acheron as well, being 45% better than Sparkle and Pela was before, in terms of AoE, damage per action value. But even then, still being better than Silverwolf in single target for E2 Acheron, by the way. For DOT, as we see here, 5% worse in comparison to Ron Mei, so don't pull him unless you have E2. Now, for my final thoughts on Jiaoqiu, I'm gonna have to say, if you want to make your Acheron stronger, whether it be because you're struggling in content, not doing enough damage in MOC 12, Apoc Shadow, oh yeah, and if you want to make Acheron work in Pure Fiction, I would say it wouldn't be a horrible idea to pull for him. It's entirely up to you what you think hypothetically 80 pulls to 140 pulls is worth, but he is definitely a very good increase on the team in comparison to Pela or Silverwolf, depending on who you're replacing. Now for DOT, if you're not getting E2, do not summon for him, unless you have like a special case like mine where you're planning on replacing him for your DOT team while your break team still has access to Ron Mei. I wouldn't say it's worth it if you're not doing something like that. Now, one main thing that made me make this video was, on my streams, I see people always slandering Jiaoqiu for no reason. I can understand not wanting to summon for him, like, you know, like deciding that it's not enough value for your account to pull for him, but everyone just treats him like he is an ass unit that has absolutely no upsides. I just wanted to try to explain that Jiaoqiu is absolutely a very effective unit at what he does. That just might not be a necessity for some people. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you want more like this, make sure to like and subscribe. See you guys in the next one. Bye everybody. Yeah.